Happy Juneteenth, my dog people. I will admit that I almost didn't record today's podcast because thinking about the oppression of my people literally makes my blood boil and fills me with so much disgust that I almost didn't want to talk about it. But we gonna talk about it. As a dog trainer, I spend every day talking about dogs, their behavior, their genetics, their training, and their relationship with their families. Now, today is Juneteenth, and like many Black Americans, I've spent part of the day reflecting on how much has changed for our people over the years. And that actually got me thinking about something that I had never really stopped to consider before. I mean, we all know dogs were used to oppress Black people throughout American history. The images of slave catching hounds and police dogs are burned into our collective memory. But I also knew that that couldn't be the whole story. Like, surely my people, my ancestors, had dogs of their own. Surely there were Black families who loved dogs, worked alongside dogs, and maybe even hunted with the dogs long before we were free. So I started asking questions. One, what was the relationship between Black Americans and dogs before Black Americans were free? What dogs did my ancestors have? What breeds? What role did dogs play in Black families? And why is it that when we talk about Black history, nobody seems to talk about the dogs in a positive light at any point? The answer ended up being far more complicated than I expected because for Black Americans, dogs have represented both companionship and oppression. When most people think about dogs today, they think about pets. You know, the dog is sleeping on the couch. You got to sign your dog up for doggy daycare. The dog is wearing a sweater and getting a pup cup from a barista at Starbucks. But for many Black families throughout American history, dogs weren't luxury items, they were survival tools. Enslaved people were often given limited food rations and frequently supplemented those rations through hunting and trapping. And so that got me curious. What breeds were my ancestors running through the woods with? The thought of running through the woods with dogs gets me very excited. The answer wasn't usually some fancy, purebred dog. Most often, it was that jack of all trades farm dog, the mutt, the hound mutt that you didn't really know what it was, but he was a very useful guy, had a lot of skills. Dogs that could help track a squirrel or help corner a hog, good old fashioned working dogs. And when I learned that, something clicked for me, especially having grown up in Southern Virginia. I typically saw my grandfather and my great uncles doing some squirrel hunting, uh, sometimes even right in their front yard from the porch. They actually weren't very into dogs themselves, but I'm sure that tradition, that family hobby, was probably part of a much older tradition that did involve dogs. And a tradition born not from recreation, but from necessity. Yeah, a tradition passed down through the generations. As I kept reading, I discovered something that made me angry. I already said I almost didn't record this one. Enslaved Black people generally could not legally own dogs because they could not legally own property. Under slavery, obviously, enslaved people themselves were considered property. So anything they possessed could legally be taken from them. And we all know that slave owners routinely separated husbands from wives, parents from children, brothers from sisters. Entire families were sold apart. So if somebody's willing to sell a person's child, how much concern do you think they have for a person's dog? Now, the truth is, we will probably never know how many stories existed about enslaved people losing beloved dogs. History just didn't preserve those stories. We had so much else going on. They just weren't as important. But enslaved people's lives were rarely considered important enough to document in the first place. And I often wonder how many unwritten stories exist about a black man or woman whose dog was taken, harmed, or killed simply to teach that person a lesson. We'll never know. So then I started to look into something a little bit more local, right here in Maryland. In 1806, a law was passed restricting dog ownership among black people. Now, think about this for a second. Just a second. A law about black people owning dogs. The law stated that free black people could only keep one dog and that dog had to be licensed and the license had to be renewed every year. And if the law wasn't followed, get this now, if the law wasn't followed, anybody could go and kill your dog. What in the world? You know what I'm saying? Anybody could go and kill your dog. The same law also restricted the ability for black people to bear arms. Shocker, right? We all know that dogs can be used as weapons. It makes complete sense that they would kind of clump all of that together. Now, ask yourself why. Was it really about the dogs? Obviously not, right? Really, it was about freedom. A capable hunting dog, I'm talking a good dog, meant you could put food on your table on a more reliable basis. A capable hunting dog meant independence from, well, white resources. The more self sufficient a person becomes, the harder they are to control. And throughout history, systems of oppression have always understood that. It wasn't about animal ownership, it was really just controlling access to resources, controlling independence, controlling freedom. But then the story gets even more complicated as we go on, right? Because dogs weren't only companions. Again, we know that they were used as instruments of oppression. The most infamous examples were the slave catching hounds, dogs trained to track down people seeking freedom. Later, during the segregation and civil rights movement, police dogs were deployed against Black Americans demanding equal treatment under the law. Some of the most famous photographs from the Civil War era show Black families facing police dogs simply for demanding basic human rights. Now, think about how strange that relationship becomes. At some moment in history, a Black family might have a dog helping them hunt for dinner, while another Black family feared even the sight of a dog because what it represented: companionship, oppression, existing side by side. The same animal, the same species, completely different meaning. But for my sake, I don't want to end this story there because Juneteenth isn't just about remembering oppression, it's about celebrating freedom. And that's where things get interesting. Today, Black Americans own dogs in record numbers. We train them, we compete with them, we breed them, we hunt them, we work them, We raise service dogs. We raise our own protection dogs, personal protection dogs that will attack on our behalf. We raise family dogs. And perhaps nothing symbolizes that change better than the German Shepherd, a breed that has become associated with police work and enforcement, a breed that appeared in some of the most painful images of the civil rights era. Yet today, Black trainers across the country work German Shepherds in obedience, sport, personal protection, search work, and service work. We didn't change the dog. We changed the story. The same intelligence, the same courage, the same trainability. But now, those qualities serve our families, our communities, our goals. History didn't get the final say. We did. That's the lesson. The story of Black people and dogs has never really been about dogs. It's always been about freedom, the freedom to own property, the freedom to provide for your family, the freedom to move, the freedom to build, the freedom to choose your own future. So today, when I see a Black family walking their dog in the neighborhood, I see more than just a pet. I see a piece of history. I see generations of people who endured unimaginable obstacles and still found ways to build lives filled with companionship, purpose, and joy. And I see a future where more Black trainers and more Black handlers, more Black breeders, and more Black working dog enthusiasts continue writing the next chapter. Because the story of Black Americans and dogs is no longer about permission. It's about mastery, it's about ownership, and most importantly, it's about freedom, y'all. Happy Juneteenth, and I'll see you in the next episode.